Okay guys, so we are doing a concept of probability in this. So uh, it is about the coins. So we are going to discuss in this video about flipping a one coin or two coins or three coins. So we'll just include these three things. Now when the questions might be like flipping a coin, flip a coin, or toss a coin, or a coin is tossed, or two coins are tossed, right? Or toss a coin, like that. So there will be different variations how they can be asked, so that's fine. So we'll just discuss about how the coins what will be the probabilities of flipping the coins any number of times, right? So now everybody knows this coin concept is very familiar to everyone in general also, because we decide in different games after tossing only, like who gets to play first, or deciding various things. So all in games, so we always say okay, first they toss the coin, and then they decide accordingly, head and tails, right? So we know there are two outcomes. So suppose if I flip a coin, then or toss a coin. Okay, so we'll start with one coin. So suppose if I flip or toss a coin, then what will be the outcomes, right? So outcomes when I flip or toss a coin, or coin is tossed, flipping a coin. Okay, so what will be the outcomes, guys? So it might be head, or it can be tails, right? So these are the only two outcomes we have. So we call this as sample space also, right? So this is the first, we have to write down the sample space, that is our to finally what outcomes we have got, that are more important first. So this is there are only two outcomes if we flip a coin, correct? Okay, so now the questions might be asked that what is the probability of getting a head, or what is the probability of getting a tail, right? Because there are only two outcomes in that, so those can only be asked. So I know these are both are equally likely outcomes, right? Equally likely outcomes. So we can get either heads or tails. So equally likely outcomes means probability of getting head will be equal to 1, because there is only one outcome for head. Favorable outcomes are only one, and total outcomes are 2. So there are like varieties of questions when we discuss. So then probability of getting tail will also be the same, because they are equally likely outcomes, because we are getting favorable outcome as 1 and total outcomes are 2, right? So total outcomes 2 we can write down here only, sometimes write down. So total outcomes, okay, no need to write down that way, so it's okay. So this was easy, I think. So you have understood the concept, like if we flip a coin or toss a coin, then we have total outcomes are 2, and those are head and tails, right? One, either it will get head or it will get tail. So till here I think easy for you, and everybody can do it. Okay, now let's move to two coins. Okay, so now we are doing two coins. So two coins means either they can be tossed simultaneously, or after one by one, so it doesn't make any difference, right? So what will be the outcomes when we flip two coins? Okay, so let's do the outcomes, or I have to write down my sample space. So my sample space for writing, either I can get okay, I'm just looking for the color. So head, or I can get head tail, or I can get tail head, right? These are the only outcomes we have. Head tail, tail head, then I can get tail. Correct. So this is my sample space, right? So this is my sample space. Okay, so what are the total number of outcomes here? So my total number of outcomes we can find out after writing the sample space. So those are 4. So either I can get head on both the coins, I have the same, or I can get tail. So those are also same outcomes, right? And either I can get head tail or tail head. So these are the only outcomes. So total outcomes are 4 here. Okay, now what different kinds of questions may be asked? Suppose if we have this. If we have this, then the questions, okay, so questions might be like that. What is the probability of getting 2 heads? Okay, I can write down 2 heads. So what will be the outcomes for getting 2 heads? 2 heads. Okay, or I can be asked like what is the probability of getting 2 tails, then probability of getting 1 head. Okay, probability of getting 1 tail, or same outcome. So probability of having same right, same outcome on the top. Okay, or I can be asked probability of getting at least 1 head, or I can be asked probability of getting at least 1 tail. Okay, we are just figuring out the different options which can be asked, right? Okay, so 1 tail, then I can be asked probability of getting what else? 1 head, 1 tail, at least, at most, also at most 1 head, or I can be asked probability of getting at most 1 tail, right? So these are just a few varieties. I'm trying to cover different options. So these questions can be asked if we have the question on 2 coins. Okay, so we have found out. So what is the formula for probability? We know it, formula for probability or finding out the probability will be equal to number of favorable outcomes by total number of outcomes. Total number of outcomes. So that we know. According to that, we have to find out the probabilities. Okay, so now in sample space for this 2, so probability of getting 2 heads, right? So what are the favorable outcomes here? So favorable outcomes are only 1, correct? So I just have one option, that is head here. So my probability is 1 by 4, because total outcomes are 4. Okay, 2 tails, same way my options will be tail, right? So that also has only one outcome. So that will be equal to again 1 by 4. Okay, then I have 1 head. Okay, so 1 head means there are 2 options. See, head tail or tail head. So my options might be head tail or tail head. So there are 2 outcomes for that. So my favorable outcomes are 2. So my answer will be 2 by 4 or half. Correct? If these type of questions are there. Then if 1 tail, same way. So same will be my outcomes. So head tail or tail head. So again I have 2 outcomes. So those will also be equal to 2 by 4. So 1 by 2. Okay, same outcome. So what will be the same outcomes? So same outcomes means either head or tail. So again these are my 2 outcomes. Favorable outcomes are 2. So 2 by 4. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So at most one head. So same way we will have the options of one head. So head, tail, head will be there. Okay. So things are getting little bit more different from here now. Because at least one head. So we have to see what we mean by at least. Okay. So probability of getting at least one head. So probability of getting at least one head. So at least means that you have to get like maximum one time head. So in what will be the outcomes in that? So at least one head means head tail and tail head, right? So it can have one head, so that outcomes will be head tail or tail head, right? So these are the two outcomes where we are getting one head. So at least head means it can have more than one head also, more than one head. So I can include the option of head also here, because it is more than. So they asked at least one head, right? So what will be the my number of outcomes? So here my favorable outcomes, how many are there? There are 3. Okay, so now according to the formula we say probability of this event, right, of getting at least one head, one head will be equal to 3 and total outcomes are 4, right? Similarly, if we have asked probability of at least one tail, right? So what will be my outcomes now? So my outcomes will be one, at least one tail, right? So tail, head tail, this will be again there, but they are just asking for one tail, at least one tail. So it can have more than one tail also. So again my probability will be equal to, probability of this event will be equal to 3 by 4, because my favorable outcomes are 3 and total outcomes are 4. Okay, let's move to next option, at most one head. Okay, so probability of getting at most one head, right? At most, right? So at most one head, I think, in the question. Okay, so at most one head, at most. So like in at least we thought that it can have 0 head, more like 2 heads, right? In this I can say that it can have 0 heads also, right? So where there are no heads, so my in my like total outcomes or my sample space, I see there is a case where there are 0 heads also, right? So it can have 0 heads means it can have tails also, at most one head, right? So it can have 0 heads also in this case. So again I have 3 outcomes, 3 favorable outcomes, right? So then again my probability of this event will be equal to 3 by 4, right? Okay, similarly if we move to next part of it, they say probability of at most one tail. So similarly my outcomes will be, you all know, right? So my what will be my outcomes? Head tail head, and at most one tail, maximum of one tail, right? So it can have 0 tail, so it can be head also. So what are my favorable outcomes here? So 3 favorable outcomes here. Okay, so now my probability of this event will also be equal to 3 by 4. Okay, we can consider 2 more cases, right? Okay, because it's just coming into my mind that it can be probability of getting at least 2 heads. Have I done that? 2 heads of at least 2 heads. No, I haven't done. Okay, so at least 2 heads. so it should have at least two heads. So what will be my favorable outcomes? So at least two heads means H and H. It is not having any option where it is having three heads, right? So my probability of this event will be equal to 1 by 4. Okay. Similarly, if I have been asked the probability of getting at least two tails, at least two tails. So what will be my two tails options or outcomes? So outcomes will be TT, that is the only option we have two tails, and I can't have more than that, correct? So that will also, probability of this event will also be equal to 1 by 4. Okay, let's consider another one, something different. Okay, so probability of getting at most two heads. Okay, so at most two heads means I can have maximum of two heads. So as we had already discussed, in most means it can have zero also, right? So most two heads means maximum is two. So it can have less than tail head or head tail. So we have four outcomes in this case. So four outcomes, right? Okay, so four outcomes. So my probability of this event is equal to 4 by 4. So it will be equal to 1. Similarly, if I go to my another similar question, so at most two tails. So at most two tails also, it can have two tails, it can have one tail, head tail, and it can have zero tail also, right? So again my favorable outcomes, right? So again my favorable outcomes will be 4. So my probability of this event will be equal to 4 by 4, so 1, right? So I think I have covered all different types of uh, questions which can be asked, or any concept which is related to two coins. So I think this should be clear. So let's move to three coins. Okay, so three coins now, like tossing three coins simultaneously. Okay, so what will be the outcomes? First we have to move to sample space, writing down our sample space. Now the term sample space is fine for you. Okay, so what will be my outcome? So head, head, head. Okay, I think I took H for yes. Okay, I was just checking the color because I wanted to take the same one. Or I can get head, head, tail, or tail, head, head, or head, tail, head. Okay, then I'll have one head here, one head here, one head here. Okay, so now head, 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 tail, tail, head, 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 tail, head, tail, tail, head, head, tail, 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 head, tail. Okay, so are these the only options, or we have more? Yeah, we have one more. So tail, tail, tail. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 outcomes. I hope this is clear to you. You can figure it out, different options. Okay, so this is my sample space. Okay, and there are total outcomes are 8. Okay, I'm still on the previous one, guys. Okay, so total outcomes are 8 here now. So we can get head, 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 tail, tail, head, 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 tail, head, tail, tail, head, or head, tail, 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 head, tail, and tail, tail, tail. So these are the outcomes which I have. So total outcomes are 8. Okay, so here I can just talk about one more concept here is there is a formula to find out like how many outcomes will be there, because suppose if you are not able to figure out all or imagine all those options, then you might make a mistake when you're writing the outcome. So maybe you can write down 7 or you can go to 9 also. Sometimes you write a similar one and you're not able to recognize. So there is a formula to write down. So suppose in any probability, right, we'll be doing for dice also or any other in further things. So if one because this is like we had for 1 coin and 2 coin and 3 coin we are doing here. So suppose if it is for 1 coin, how many outcomes are there for 1 coin? There are 2 outcomes, right? So if we increase the coin, so the power is 1 for this one. So if there are 2 coins, then the power will be 2. If there are 3 coins, power will be 3. So this way we can figure out. So base is for 1 coin and the power becomes for number of coins, right? So for any like one die also, if you say there are 6 outcomes, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and then if there are 2 die, we'll have a different video for that. So it will be 6 raised to the power 2. So there will be 36 outcomes. Okay, so here we have for 1 coin 2 outcomes, and then for 2 coins there are 4 outcomes, and then for 3 coins there are 8 outcomes. So this is the way we figure it out. Okay, so now you understand what is about the formula. So like outcomes by number of those things. So how many coins you are flipping simultaneously, it depends on that. Fine. So this we talked about one more concept here. Okay, now we'll come back to our questions, which will be based on 3 coins, right? So there might be different varieties of questions on this, like we did in very detail for 2 coins. So now suppose if the probabilities can be asked, so there will be probabilities of getting, so okay, so you have to find out the probability of getting one head. Okay, so we'll go one by one, I think. So one head, how many things have one head? Not this one, this one, this one. So we just have tail, tail, head, head, tail, tail, and THT. So we have 3 outcomes, right? So we have one head, right? So my outcomes will be how much? What will be my outcomes? So head, tail, tail, or tail, tail, head, or I have tail, head, tail, right? These are the only 3 outcomes which I have for I'm considering only one head. So one head is here, 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 right? So 3 outcomes. Okay, so probability of this event will be equal to 3 by 8, because now we know the formula we have discussed. So 3 are my favorable outcomes and 8 are my this thing. Now probability of getting one tail, right? So what will be my outcomes? Outcomes will be one tail. So tail, head, head, and head, head, tail, and head, tail, head, right? So these are the outcomes for my one tail, right? So one tail, 1 2 3 options I can see from my sample space. So probability of this event will also be equal to 3 by 8. Now probability of getting 2 heads. Okay, so 2 heads, what will be the options? How many options are there? 1 2 3, that's all. 3 only for 2 heads, 1 2 and 3. Okay, so head, head, tail, tail, head, head, and head, tail, head. So these are the options. So probability of this event will also be equal to 3 by 8. Similarly, I can go for 2 tails. So for this also my options will be tail, tail, head, and head, tail, tail, and two tails, right? So okay, so these are my three options for two tails. Okay, I have colored it differently, so 1 2 3, right? So again this probability will also be equal to 3 by 8. Okay, now probability of getting three heads. Okay, let's see. So three heads will be only one, I think. So this will be the only outcome for this, three heads, right? So now my probability of this event will be equal to 1 by 8. Similarly, probability of three tails, so those will also be my options. These are my options. Okay, so options are tail, tail, tail. Okay. So my options are tail, tail, tail. So my probability of this event is also equal to 1 by 8. Okay, so we have done 1 2 and 3. Now we come to at least one, at most one, those type of questions, right? As we did in this two coins, right? So we had 2 and 1 and then same outcome. Yeah, we can do for same outcome also. Now we can do the probability of having the same outcome. Right, same outcome on this means same on all the three, same outcome. So it my favorite like outcomes will be head, 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 or tail, tail, tail. So these are the only two options. So probability of this event is equal to 2 by 8 or 1 by 4. Okay, now next can be probability of having at least one head. Okay, so at least one head means it can have more than one head, right? Now I think it's clear to you. So at least one head, so that will be equal to head, tail, tail, at least one head. Okay, let's see this. So what will be the options for this one? At least one head. So except TTT, all have at least one head. It can have more than one head, right? So there are all 7 outcomes are there for this one. So 7 outcomes are head, tail, tail, then tail, head, head, or tail, head, tail, or at least one head will include all the 3 heads also. Then HTTTHH, then what else? Head, tail, head, 1 2 3 4 5, then HHT, right? So 5 6. What is left, guys? So let's see which one is left. Head, 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 HHT, then I have THH. Yeah, THH. Okay, this is there. Then H, TTH, TTH. So these are my 7 outcomes. So my probability of this event will be equal to 7, because total outcomes are 7. So that will be my answer. Fine. Now at least one head and at least one tail I can do similarly, right? So probability of getting at least one tail. So now I think do I need to write the outcomes or is it clear to you? I think I can write down all the options with the one tail. So it can have more than one tail, right? So we have all the 7 options except this head, 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 right? So again I can say that my favorable outcomes are 7. So then I can just write down or at least one tail. Okay, so my outcomes, okay, let me write down. So my outcomes will be one tail, right? So it can have more than one tail, at least one tail, right? So outcomes are head, tail, 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 head. Then I have tail, head, head, then I have head, head, tail, head, tail, head, and tail, head, tail. So again these are my 7 outcomes, so my probability of this event will be equal to 7 by 8. Now at least 2 we can do, so at least 2 tails. So it can have 2 tails as well as more than 2 tails, because at least it said. So my outcomes will be what will be my outcomes for 2 tails? Head, tail, tail. More than that, okay, tail, tail, head, right? So and one more, tail, head, tails. So 2 tails, right? At least 2 tails. It won't have less than 2 tails. So less than 2 tail means it can't have 1 tail, and it can't have 0 tails, correct? It can have 3 tails also. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 outcomes, right? So my probability of this event is equal to 4 by 8. So that is equal to 1 by 2. Same way, if I go similarly for the next question, that probability of at least 2 heads. Okay, so at least 2 heads means it will not include 0 head, or it will not include 1 head. So 2 heads and above. So 2 heads means my outcomes are tail, head, head, then I have head, head, tail. I can have 3 heads and have 2 heads, head, tail, head. That's fine. Okay, so 4 outcomes. So probability, so there are 4 outcomes. So probability of this event will be equal to again 4 by 8. So this is also equal to 1 by 2. So we have done at least 1 head. We have done the same thing also, same outcomes. Okay, now we can do at most. Okay, let's do at least first. So probability of getting at least 3 heads. So it will have 3 heads or more, but there are only 3 coins, so it can't have more than 3 heads in any of the option, and we have written the options also. So my outcome is only 1, right? 3 heads is this one, right? So only 1 outcome. So my probability of this event will be equal to 1 by 8. Okay, so I think we have covered this at least part. Now let's move to at most. So probability of getting at most 1 head. See, this will be just opposite of at least this 3 heads. Okay, so at most 1 head, maximum of 1 head. So maximum, so my what will be my outcomes here? At most, maximum of 1 head. That it, can it have less than 1 head? Yes, it can have 0 heads also. So 0 head means it will give an option as TTT, at most 1 head, right? And 1 head has HTT and TTH. That's all, and one more, THT, right? So at most 1 head will include 0 also, 0 heads also. So that's why sometimes it's confusing. At most means you just think, okay, if it is head is not there, then we can't do. So those are 4 options. So 4 outcomes here. So I can say my probability of this event is equal to 4 by 8. So this is also equal to 1 by 2. Okay, let's move to next part for most. So now probability of getting at most 1 tail. Okay, yeah, so we are moving to most. So what will be my outcomes here for at most 1 tail? So it can have maximum of 1 tail, we can say like that. So 1 tail means I have tail, head, head, and head, tail, head, maximum of one tail, and head, head, tail. But maximum of one tail means it can include zero tail also, head, head, head also, right? So again, four outcomes here. Four outcomes are there, favorable outcomes, favorable, right? So now my probability of this event will be equal to 4 by 8. So this is equal to 1 by 2. Okay, now we did we'll move to two heads and two tails now. So probability of getting two heads now, not two heads that we've done, at most two heads, right? Okay, so at most two heads. At most two heads. So at most two heads means maximum of two heads. It can't have more than two heads, but zero heads will be there. So two heads, it can have less than that also. So my outcomes will be HTT, one head, or it can have zero heads also, right? So tail, tail, tail will also be included, and tail, tail, head. Then definitely this has two heads. Then it won't have 3H, right? So then it can have HTH and THT. Okay, maximum of two heads, so all 7, right? Okay, at most two heads, so maximum of two heads. So it can have less than two heads, but it can't have three heads. So all these three with two, and then 1 1 1 and 0 head also, right? So all these are included. So this will have the probability of 7 outcomes. So 7 are my favorable outcomes, right? So 7 outcomes here total, my favorable outcomes. So my probability of this event is equal to 7 by 8. Okay, I think two more we can do of different options. So now probability of at most two tails. Okay, so at most two tails, what will be my outcomes here? So at most two tails, it won't have three tails, excepting all, right? All 7 outcomes will be there, my favorable outcome. So except three tails, so all 7 outcomes. Okay, so probability of this event will also be equal to 7 by 8. Okay, now we have probability of at most 3 heads. So just one outcome, right? So at most, no, all outcomes will be there, because at most 3 heads, it can have less than 3 heads also, like we did in our at most 3, right? For 2 also we did at most 2. So there was 2 tails and 2 fins. So there are all outcomes which are at most 3 heads or 3 tails. So it can have 0 also in the most things. So the probabilities will be 1 for both of them. So all 8 outcomes. So all 8 outcomes are there for this. So all 8 are my favorable outcomes with at most 3 heads. So 3 heads, again try to understand. So the 3 heads are maximum, but it can have 2 heads also, 1 head also, and 0 head also, right? So all outcomes will be there. So probability of this 8 by 8, so this is equal to 1. Same way, if I go for probability of having at most 3 tails. Okay, so 3 tails. So this is also all outcomes are there. So they include all the 8 outcomes, my favorable outcomes. So probability of this event will also be 8 by 8. So this is also equal to 1. right? So now I think we have covered all the different concepts which are related to the coins, right? So one coin, two coin, three coin, and on different variation of questions they can be asked from this concept. So I think it's fine, and if you have any doubt, just post in the comment section and let me know. Okay, bye.